Well, good morning, everybody. Danny back from Deep South Homestead with our porch talk today. I'm up with you guys this morning. It's actually 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting here waiting. The new time has me all messed up, and I'm up looking out the window here. I can see it barely turning daylight out there just a little bit, and it's 30-something degrees this morning, guys. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's finally turned cold. And the room I'm in here has no heat in it right now, and it's actually fairly chilly in here. So I've got my, my long sleeves on and everything. It's our little sitting room on the back of the camp that we come in to just enjoy ourselves. Now there is a heater in here, a fireplace type heater, but if I turn it on, the little fan motor on it's going to make all kind of racket and everything. So I'd rather just leave it off. And plus, we have waited for months and months and months for it to turn cool, and it's finally here. And I'm not about heated up in here, because it probably today will warm up to 70 or 75 degrees today, and it'll be warm enough, But it's always a blessing to be able to get up in the morning and spend it with you guys. It's been the first time, I think, in quite a long time, maybe a couple of years, I've actually got up in the morning to do porch time with you guys, and at the same time of the morning, because I'm getting ready to go out and feed the cows and start taking care of chores and stuff like that, feed the chickens and see if we got a frost this morning. I hope not, but you never know. There's no wind and it's in the 30s. It's possible we could have got some patchy frost. But I got a lot of work to do today, and I told Wanda, I said, you know what, being it's in the 30s outside right at this moment, I'm going to spend it with you guys this morning and give it just a little bit of time for the sun to come on up here where I can at least see the trees good before I get out and ride on that cold Ranger with that wind blowing in my face. So, guys, I've really been struggling with this one today. I've been where some of you are at, and I do read the comments on our videos. Now, I may not always get to every comment, but I do read them. I go back on a lot of our older videos and stuff in the mornings if I can't sleep or something. I just go back to older videos and go through comments and stuff. Look at the ones that hasn't been looked at and different things, and I'm noticing a trend. A lot of people are hurting right now. Not from the government issue. I'm talking about a lot of people are hurting from having to take care of others and long-term care of people who have issues. And those of us who, I did it for 6 years. Y'all know I've told my story. I had a wife that had cancer for 6 years, and I've seen things that people shouldn't have to see, and things I didn't think I'd ever have to see in my life. Never dreamed of seeing things like I've seen. The mutilation of the human body through treatment and surgical procedures and just all kinds of things where I experiment with the human body with cancer and stuff like that. And my situation was no different with my wife. And having been a guy who had seen a lot throughout his life and experienced quite a lot of stuff, when it's your own that you see this away, then it's a little different. When you see someone else that you don't really know or you have no connections to or anything like that, it's bad and it's tragic, and you look at it and go, wow, that's bad, And you don't think about it too much, and you move on and go on about your daily business. But when it's your own, it stays with you. It doesn't go away. You know, it's always there in your mind. And when I married my former wife, she had, I've told y'all, she had 3 of her children that were killed in a car accident at one time. One had just walked the football field, was homecoming maid, and one was a little girl and the other was a little boy, Seth and Rebecca and Cassandra. And she was devastated to lose them all 3 at one time, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. That's probably the worst tragedy a parent could ever experience in life, and she had absolutely nobody to help her. You know, her husband wasn't part of her life at that time, and she had to struggle and get through life on her own and try to figure things out on her own from that point forward. And when I married her, you know, or when I first started dating her, she told me, she said, "You'll be just like all the other guys. Once you find out about my past, you'll run just like all other guys have." And well, I told her, I said, "I don't know, let's talk about it." And when she told me, I showed her pictures of my children, and it's kind of amazing. My daughter and her daughter were the same age, and my younger daughter and her younger daughter were the same age, and actually looked a lot alike. That was a really freaky thing about it. And their accident was on October the 17th at 7-something in the morning on the way to school. I had an accident that I almost died in October the 17th at the exact same time of the morning that her children were killed. Different years, but same time frames and stuff. And I told her, I said, "I'm not going to run." I said, at that time I had been a counselor, a preacher, and different things. And I told her, I said, "I might can help you work through it. You know, let's just see what we can do." And I began to work with her and was able to help her, through the help of the Lord, get through a lot of the stages that she was hung up in. And we went on from that point to her we traveled around a lot and went to churches and different meetings and different kinds of things like that. And we would I would run a PowerPoint presentation for her, and she talked about the 7 stages of grief and the loss of her children, and people just flocked to that kind of stuff. I mean, people were hurting, and people hurt all the time, and they're hurting now. I can see it. And I can say this: whether you've lost someone or whether you're taking care of someone, it's really not a lot of difference. Pain is pain. And I'll share a story with you, just brief. She and I had just become members of this large church, and I knew the pastor, had known him for years, and he asked us, the first time we went there, he asked us out to lunch, and we went out, and Debbie was explaining to him about the loss of her children and all this kind of stuff and everything, and he knew my story, because he knew my mother and my father and my family and stuff like that. Now, I didn't know him personally, but my mom and dad did. My mom and dad knew him real well. And he just stopped her right in the middle of her talking, and he said, Miss Debbie, he said, the loss of children is really great. It's really tragic. He said, but your children are with the Lord. And she said, yes, mine were saved. They're with the Lord. And he said, this guy sitting right here beside you, at this point, he has children that he doesn't even know where they're at in the world. He doesn't know what's going on in their life. He doesn't know what kind of conditions they're under right now. Because I had a situation going on in my life earlier. And he said, you know your children's with the Lord. They're at peace right now. This man doesn't even know where his children are at this time. And he doesn't even know what's going on in their life, and he is suffering probably worse than you are, and you just haven't come to terms with it yet. And well, it was a shocker for her, being the first time we had been out with this pastor and his wife to eat, and he really got through to her. Where I couldn't get through, he did get through, and boy, did it make an impact on her life, you know. And she comes to the realization that sometimes people who have those that are left behind with us here are hurting worse than those who actually have lost loved ones, have gone on to heaven, in which they know they'll be with them again, and they know they're at peace and they're at comfort. They don't have to worry about them because they know they're with the Lord. And I've gone and I've looked at the comments, guys. I go back and read them on live streams, and you know, and everything that we go through and the videos we do, and a lot of our subscriber base is of an older age, like we are, and they are, some of them are some of you all are taking care of people who your husbands or spouses or maybe disabled children and different things, and you're really struggling. I've read lots of comments, people dealing with depression, anxiety. I've been there, you know. I wish there was some magic words that I could say that would just change everything, you know, but having been a counselor and having been through my own tragedies in life, it doesn't matter who you are. Some of these things are no respecter of persons, you know. Cancer doesn't care who it comes after, you know. It doesn't matter if you're wealthy, poor, you know, whatever. It strikes everybody. No matter race, creed, whatever, it hits all of us. And tragedies hits everyone at some point in their life. Everybody experiences some sort of tragedy. Nobody gets through life without experiencing something. Job, in the book of Job explains that when he tells us a story about how that when you have a fire going at night and you throw a chunk of wood in it, and all those embers that fly up from it, you know, there are hundreds of thousands of them flying up as you watch them fly up in the air. And Job explains man's troubles is like those embers of fire going up in the air. There are too many to count. In other words, life is full of troubles. And the Lord even himself tells us, you know, we'll suffer throughout this lifetime. And it's just normal, it's natural. And some of when I would counsel with people used to, I would tell them, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, what's going on in your life. When tragedy strikes, not everybody deals with it in the same manner. Now, there are 7 basic stages of grief that people go through, and nobody goes through them in any one particular order. Nobody feels the same way through every stage. No one stays in the stage at the same length of time. Some people fly through some stages and get hung up on others, where some get hung up on the ones that other people just fly through. You know, I mean, it all depends on your temperament. You know, whether you're a sanguine, a choleric, you know, it depends on which one of the temperaments you are. There's 4 basic temperaments, a phlegmatic, or, you know, and it just depends on which one you are, and that will determine your strengths and your weaknesses, and where you will falter, where you will not falter, and how you will look at things in life. And God can use any one of the basic temperaments in life. You know, Paul, the apostle, was a strong choleric. Peter was a choleric. You know, Abraham was a sanguine. I mean, a phlegmatic. Abraham was a phlegmatic, and it just depends on your personality. I mean, we all have 4 grandparents, and each one of them could have been a different basic temperament, and you may have mixtures of all four of them, but there'll be one that will be stronger than all the others. So all of that will determine how well you handle these different stages of grief that a person goes through. Now, I'll read you off here the 7 stages of grief. It's been, guys, you have to understand, it's been almost 18 years since I've actually done these types of talks and presentations and stuff like that with people. I haven't counseled with anybody in probably 18 years now, and it's when you don't use something, you will lose it. But there's things that's always in your mind. But what I will do is, I will tell you some of these stages. Now, the first one is shock and denial, because the initial of losing someone, even though like me, Miss Debbie was 6 years of cancer. I knew at some point I would lose her, but when she died in my hands and I was trying to save her life, there's still that shock and denial that it ever happened, and you say, and you there's a ton of things you go through during that time. Even though you're anticipating it, it still happens to you. It will still happen to you. Now, some people, because they've had to deal with long-term care of an elderly person, is able to get through some of that pretty quick because they know it's coming, and even though it hurts, they're saying, well, they're not hurting anymore. They're at peace, and then 9 times out of 10, you'll end up like I was after being for 6 years, having to be bound down almost 24 hours a day with a person. When they're gone, you kind of feel like a dog that's been put in a pen for all of his life, and he's let go and doesn't really know what to do with himself. He runs, and he just aimlessly runs at everything, because he's free. He's not under that bondage anymore, and you don't really know what to do with yourself. And that will lead into other stages of grief. And then you have pain and guilt is another one. We hurt differently, and then if we're not careful, we blame ourselves. Well, if I had only done this, or if I had only done that, or if I'd have been better at this, or there's that what if syndrome, that people go through, and it's not your fault. These are natural, they're normal. There is nothing about these that are unusual. You're not unusual, There's nothing wrong with you if you experience these things. It is perfectly natural. And I had a friend of mine, he and I were real close, and his wife and my wife were friends, and both of them come down with cancer. Well, his wife died right before mine did. And he come to me one day, and he was just crying. Big, robust, stocky built guy. He was just crying. He said, brother, I did something and I don't know how to get past it. And I was like, oh my Lord. I said, what did you do, brother? He said, I hollered and screamed at God, and I cursed God and told him, why did he do this to me? And he says, and now I hate I done it. He said, I don't know why I did it. I just did it. He says, and now I feel guilty for doing it. And he says, I'm afraid God's going to do something to me. I said, brother, ho. I said, look, God made you. God expects you to share those emotions back with Him. He understands. He knows it's not you who done it. It's the flesh that did it. The Apostle Paul in the Scriptures plainly teaches, he says, I do the things I shouldn't do, and I don't do the things I should do. He said, but it's not me, it's the flesh. And I told him, I said, brother, look, God understands. All you got to do is say, Father, I'm sorry. I said, He died for that right there, brother. And he said, man, that's why I love you so much. He said, and he was just hugging on me and everything, and he said, you probably the best friend I ever had in the world, and I told him, I said, it's okay. God understands. He understands hurt. He understands pain because He created it. And it is perfectly natural for this to happen. And he said, all right. He said, man, that's why I come to you, and he went on, and he's remarried, and got a wonderful life, married a wonderful lady now. He told me he didn't think he'd ever be able to get beyond, that point in his life. And I told him, I said, you'll get past it. You'll get past it. I promise you. and he's doing fine today, you know. But we also deal with one of the other things that you'll deal with is anger and bargaining. You know, we feel angry, like this brother of mine was. He was angry at God. I got angry at God. I stayed angry for, oh my goodness, probably a couple of years. I was angry with God. You know, God, why did you do this to me? Why? And finally, God, you know, God, the Holy Spirit laid on my heart and said, you know, she belonged to me before she belonged to you, and she's mine. She's not really yours. I just let you borrow her for a while, you know, here upon this earth. She's mine. I'm bringing her home. She has completed her task here that I put her here to do, and it's time for her to come home, you know, and she's not yours. She's mine. I made her. And when I finally got beyond that, I was able to heal, you know, and get back up and get going again. But then some people deal with depression, you know. Thankfully, I didn't go through that. I went through that earlier. Or something happened earlier in my life that I did go through that. I spent 4 years in massive depression at one point in my life, and that's a tough one. Now, depression, usually when you're dealing with depression or anxiety, these types of issues, is usually what's happened is you've been under a stressful situation for quite a while, and you have depleted the magnesium out of your system, because many times chemical imbalances within the body is one of the main reasons we feel certain things happening to us, because we have an imbalance of chemicals within our body, and we've depleted our body of certain hormones and chemicals. Thus, it will send us into anxiety type things, depression, mental illnesses, and stuff like that. Many of them are caused by imbalances within the body. Hormonal imbalances. Some women may have, you know, go through estrogen changes. Some guys testosterone changes. Especially when you go through certain points in life, you go through what's called a change of life, where you get an imbalance of hormones and stuff like that, and people will do things that just they normally wouldn't do, you know. And guys, today I'm just skimming today. Okay, I'm skimming today. Just understand that I'm not going in depth. I'm just skimming. People do things they don't normally do. Men, when they reach a certain age in life, they realize they're not youthful anymore. They'll do stupid things. And women go through the change of life just like men do, go through menopause, and sometimes they cry all the time. Some women don't cry. I mean, there's a ton of things that people experience that is perfectly normal. And we just, because we haven't experienced them before in our life, we think there's something wrong with us, and there's not. We're just normal people going through the normal changes of life. God made us this way. Some people who experience different tragedies I had one friend, his wife went on a buying impulse and spent tens of thousands of dollars when they lost a child, and ran up their bills so high he was in debt they ended up having to file bankruptcy and everything like that, and she finally come out of it. And then I had one friend who, it wasn't a friend, it was just an acquaintance, his hair all fell out. When he lost his wife, his hair all fell out. And he didn't know what happened. You know, he said, my hair's gone. And I told him, I said, brother, stress does a lot of things to the human body. And you're dealing with stress, you know, and you need to, once you level out and get beyond this, your hair may come back. And it did. His whole head of hair came back. And he just could not believe that. You know, I told him, I said, stress will do all kinds of crazy things to your body, you know. But moving on here, we go through what's called an upward turn. And I'm going to use the word reconstruction, because once we begin to get beyond certain points in our life and we kind of get to leveling out and get back on our feet again and get beyond some of these issues that we've been dealing with, we begin to make an upward turn and our life begins to come back to normal again, and we begin to reconstruct ourselves. You know, I mean, like when my wife, right before she passed away, one of the things she told me, because she had dealt with this before, she said, you're going to have to get a whole new group of friends. You know, and I couldn't understand that. I said, what? She said, Danny, they're not going to understand. You're just not going to fit in anymore. They won't know what to say when they're around you, because they're afraid if they say something, it's going to be out of the way and it's going to hurt you, and they'll just avoid you, basically. So you're going to end up with new friends. And she was 100% right. I went back to church and I'd look around and everybody's still with all their wives and spouses and, you know, and girlfriends and everything. And I was sitting over by myself, and when I'd try to mingle with them and stuff like that, well, they was kind of quiet and reserved because they didn't know what to say, or they was afraid to say something might hurt my feelings, and I didn't fit in anymore because I was like a third arm, you know what I mean? And I ended up getting all the new friends, basically. And it's okay. It is perfectly okay. You know, it's natural and it's okay, you know? Then, once you get to that point, you begin to work through things, and you have what's called acceptance. Once you begin to work through all these situations that you've been dealing with, and it happens, you work through them. Now, some people can work through them and go through these 7 stages in probably, I've seen people do it in a couple of months, and I've seen people take, I just dealt with a 70-something-year-old man who's been doing it for 30-something years, you know. I told him, I finally helped him get beyond some places that he was at in his life. And he told me, he said, why don't pastors, why don't preachers, why don't people tell people this stuff when they're going through things? And I'm like, I don't know why. I mean, I really don't know why. I just do what I can when I can. I'm not a genius. I mean, I'm just put here by God to do the things that God wants me to do. And God put me through them so that I would know what it's like to talk to people who are experiencing these things, you know. And let me tell you this. If you're experiencing any of these things right now, it's quite possible that in the very near future of your life, God is preparing you to help others going through the same exact thing that you are. Because there's going to come a day, all these storm clouds are going to pass. You know, have you ever noticed how when a bad thunderstorm comes over and it's really, really bad? I mean, the weather's just horrific, you know, and it's just like tearing up everything, and everything is chaotic, and you're like, man, you're scared. You're like, man, I hope my house stands, and I hope this happens. We go through this with hurricanes, and people do it with tornadoes and all severe thunderstorms. But when the storm clouds pass, the sky turns off blue and the sun comes back out, and the smell afterwards is just awesome. You know, you go outside and the smell of rain is in the air, and everything's okay. You know, that's the way life is. We go through these storms in life, and once they're over and the storm clouds pass and we can see the daylight again at the end of the tunnel, and we realize we're left here for a reason, and God has a plan. God tells us in the scriptures, I know you, I made you, I have a plan for you, that you might prosper. And guys, as bad as some tragedies may seem, there are times in our lives where we have to go through these things, because if we don't know what other people experience unless we've experienced it ourselves. And don't think it's strange. You're not unusual. There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly normal. It's just that God is working a plan through you, and He wants to bring it to fruition. Let Him do it, and love Him, and He'll make you a wonderful creature in the end. Thank you, guys, from Deep South Homestead.